Hello, congregation. Thank you so much for joining us today as we have another episode of the Unveiled podcast. And as we finish up our attached series dealing with foster care in the month of May, which is Foster Care Awareness Month, welcome to the Unveiled podcast. As you can see, I've got Robbie here with me again.
Happy to be here.
I didn't know if you'd be on the podcast again so soon.
Well, it just is what it is, I guess.
We did kind of a poll on my Instagram and my Facebook, just asking questions that people who are not involved with the foster care system, questions they might have for foster parents. And I didn't really want to do this alone. So I figured, Robbie, come on back. So we've got a list of questions here that people have asked, just things that they wanted to know about the foster care system from the perspective of a foster parent. I think we should say that. Like, these answers to these questions are strictly from our perspective as foster parents.
And also our opinions.
But there may be some things here that we get a little bit wrong because we are not CPS caseworkers or case managers. So things that maybe we think are how things go, there could be other ways that they happen, and we just don't know it because we're not on that side. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes perfect sense. Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you. I did want to say that your part of our podcast was received very well.
Oh, that's awesome.
You did a great job.
Thank you. I try to let you do as much of the talking as possible.
Yeah, when I was editing that, I thought, God, I really talked a whole lot.
Well, I mean, it is our story, but, you are more involved directly with that just because of, kind of how our, relationship, marriage, whatever you want to call it.
How our time goes.
Yeah, how our time is split. So, I mean, I think it was perfectly valid, and it's not like you steamrolled over me. So I got my piece in. I'm good.
Good to know. Okay, are you ready to get started?
Yep.
Okay, so we've got a list of questions. I don't know if we'll get to all of them. I don't want this to be a super long podcast episode because I know that I like to listen to podcasts when I'm in the car driving places, and sometimes it's really difficult to remember where I'm at when I jump back in the car again and I'm in the middle of a podcast. So let's start with question number 1, and this is, you've prepared your children well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What advice can you give a family new to fostering?
I think the most important thing is, and I mentioned this in my words of wisdom at the end of the last podcast, which you haven't seen it, go watch it. Shameless plug.
Thanks, Robbie.
You're welcome. Is to communicate, be very transparent. Number one, between both partners that are involved, obviously. And the second thing is just to be really open with your kids. To make sure that they understand, and, they may be too young to really truly understand, but, kind of start having those conversations when and where if possible. And I think also make sure they're part of the decision.
Right.
Whether you do it, you continue to do it, you stop doing it, you take a pause, make sure that they're at least involved in those conversations so that they feel like they have input, even if you decide, because for instance, Avery may decide let's do it. Let's do it right now. And then, Mallory can be like, whoa, let's pump the brakes for a second and take a month off or whatever. But just at least make sure they're part of those conversations so they feel involved and they understand why why you're doing it. I think is super important.
I agree 100%. It's kind of funny when you said that because that is exactly how it goes at our house. Like, a foster child will leave and we're broken for a couple days, and then Avery's like, let's do it again. But for example, this time we are taking a break before we have another foster child join our family, and Avery is gung-ho, and she's constantly asking questions about when the next foster baby is going to come. Is it going to be a girl this time? All these different things. But we do like to keep her. Beckett obviously we will include him in the conversation as he gets older, but we always make it a family decision. Not necessarily details, like Robbie said, but if Avery were to come to us one day and say, I don't want to do this anymore, we would definitely take that and probably honestly stop.
Yeah.
Because she is a part of the family and she is a priority. Every child, every family member is a priority. So,
and I think it depends on why she wants to stop too. Is it she wants to stop? I don't know. I mean, it's up to every family, every situation, every conversation, is to, kind of what or why, you make the decision either way.
Mm-hmm. Question number 2 is, how would you know if a foster child was meant to be a forever member of your family? We were laughing about this because I did read him the questions before we started. And the hard part is you really don't have a say up until the very last part of the process.
Yeah. Basically it's up to the court system and the courts to decide that, they're going to terminate parental rights. Mm-hmm. And then at that point, it's, okay, it can go to an adoption case. There's some stuff around like, okay, if it's been a year, then the foster parents are able to hire a lawyer and basically fight for the child to, keep them in the home. But really, there's no way of really knowing for sure that the child is staying up until, they're adopted and the adoption paperwork goes through and the hearing. And like I mentioned last time, we've had multiple caseworkers say, oh yeah, I've seen cases like this before, this child's staying with y'all forever. So just get, be ready for that. And, through whatever circumstances, the child ends up moving to a different home, or whatever happens. And so, yeah, you don't know until it happens.
One of the hardest parts about foster care is realizing that the goal of foster care in the beginning and always until it isn't is reunification. No matter what the child has gone through previously, whether it's, drugs are in the picture or violence is in the picture or neglect, in the beginning, when a child comes into care, it's always reunification. And I will be honest with you, as a foster parent, that's really hard sometimes to it's a hard pill to swallow because you look at this child's past and some of the things that they've gone through and you think, why would we not want to take them away from that permanently? But even when it's hard to swallow that pill, there has been many studies done that show that a child is best in their family, in their biological family, if it's feasible and safe for them to be. So if a parent is going to step up and do the work and do all the things that they need to get their child back in their care and back in their home, that is the purpose of foster care. Is it always that way? No, it's not always that way. But that is the purpose of foster care. And so until a judge decides that's no longer the purpose, no longer the goal, they call it a permanency goal, no longer the permanency goal, you almost try not to think about it because it can so easily not be that way. That child could go either back to the family or to a family member, or they could go to another foster home with a family member. So I do think that it's hard. We are a foster to adopt home, which when people hear that, they say, oh, so you want to adopt? Well,
it's not our intention.
It's not the only reason that we started foster care.
Foster to adopt enables it so that if the circumstances line up that a child is in our home and they become available to it, like the goal changes to adoption, they don't have to disrupt placement to move them to an adoptive household. Our home is open, bring them on.
Right.
Back to the goal being reunification. It's a hard pill to swallow and it's hard to watch. But when I flip the tables and I put myself in those shoes, I would want that. I would want my kids with me. Right. I want my kids with me. And so to know that that's the goal, you got to get your stuff done and you got to do what you need to do. But, I think flipping the tables, it is good to see, that there's a chance.
Right. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Question number 3 is, how hard is it balancing the needs of your own children with those of a foster child?
I feel like it's not, once they're in your home, they're one of your children. Mm-hmm. And we treat them like we treat our other children. We expect, we have the same expectations for them. We love them just the same. I think in certain extenuating circumstances, things are like, we mentioned in the previous podcast where we had to disrupt placement, that's one thing. But, before, you come to that decision and have to make that decision, you really just include them. You know, they're one of the kids. They're one of ours. We'll hold on to them and we love them and, you know, protect them like one of ours.
Right. And I think just even logistic wise, like foster children have a lot more of appointments because they've got several of them the first month that you have to get, but then you've got things like therapies and ECI, which is early childhood intervention if they're under 3 years old. And
do you want to explain what ECI is real quick?
Sure. So I think it's under 3. I'm pretty sure it's under 3. It may be 4 and under. But ECI is early childhood intervention. If you think about a child that goes to physical therapy, maybe they're a little delayed with their walking or crawling or rolling, or maybe they have speech therapy because they've got certain issues there. Maybe they have feeding therapy when they're younger because they're not, you know, getting the milk like they need to or whatever it might be. And they even have things like occupational therapy. So every child that comes into care under the age of 3 years old, and this is the only thing I really know because we've never fostered a child over the age of 3, will have an ECI evaluation where they have somebody come out. Sometimes it's a team of people that come out to the house and they evaluate them for speech, occupational therapy, and physical therapy. And then they therefore determine, yes, this child qualifies for one of the 3, all of the 3, 2 of the 3, and they will help you set up those services for your child so that they can continue to get right back on track of where their peers are at that point. So in the beginning, it can be a lot logistically, but the really nice thing about how our job schedule is I'm part-time with a very flexible schedule. I can kind of make my schedule as I need to, and Robbie works from home. So it's easy for me to, if I need to, drop kids off at home during nap time and go take someone to an appointment. You just kind of figure things out. You would do the same thing if it was your own biological child. You're going to do no different if it's a foster child. Okay, I actually kind of really like this one. This one came from a good friend of mine who is a foster parent in a different state. And she said, what was your expectation versus the reality of the foster care system?
I don't really, maybe I'm not the right one to answer this. I don't really know that I had much in the way of expectations. So it was just kind of like the reality of it was like, okay, this is the reality. Yeah.
I think I had heard many times not so great things about the system in general, about CPS in general. And I think that we have kind of seen both sides of the spectrum. We've got our own experience to go off of. I, in my opinion, think that CPS and the foster care system has its flaws, but also it's not nearly as bad as some people have said. I have a hard time seeing how many children are on a caseworker's caseload and getting upset saying, well, they didn't text me back immediately. Well, but that's because they've got 20 kids on their caseload and we are one family. There may be 19 other families. And so I think that there are things that are better than I expected, and there are things that are kind of maybe not as good as I expected, but I think it's just reality. Everything has, every system, every job, I mean, everything can have improvements. And I think it's the same with the foster care system. But something that I will tell you is I love our agency and the way that they have supported us and the way that they love the kids that come into our home and our own biological children.
Yeah, that's really, really cool to see too.
Really supportive.
Yeah, I think like anything, there's good ones, there's bad ones, but you hit the nail on the head. You know, these poor caseworkers, they average, 20 kids, easy. And it's just, they don't have, they've got time off and stuff like that. But, we've had, kids dropped off at 11:30 at night, and the caseworker's been going 24 hours. Mm-hmm. Like they've not slept in the last 24 hours. That's how busy they are. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard to be mad at somebody who's doing the best they can on, a couple hours of sleep and an energy drink.
And we wonder why there's such a high turnover.
Yeah,
you cannot
exactly.
do that forever.
Yeah, exactly. That just leads to burnout,
Absolutely.
And so.
And to think that, like, I think about our kids and our schedule. Okay, so I've got a dentist appointment for this kid and I've got a doctor's appointment for this kid. Now, our caseworker, let me back up a little bit. We have a case manager through our agency that helps us with our stuff, like our certificates and our certifying our home and making sure that we're doing everything that we should be as foster parents. Each child that comes into your home will have a caseworker, which is through the CPS side. But these caseworkers, not only do they have probably their own children, but they've got 19, 20 kids, and they have to know, okay, they went to the doctor on this day. Okay, I just got a notification from the foster parent that they're going to be going to another doctor's appointment on this day. Now they have a specialist, and they're also dealing with the biological parents of the foster kids. So they've got everybody to try and manage. And so I think the best thing that we can do as foster families, but also just people in general, is just give them grace, because they've got so much going on and they have such an important job.
Yeah, I think I was going to say that was just give them grace and love them, and support them. I mean, there's not much we can do to support the caseworkers, but, keep your stuff together. I was going to say a different word, but I can't. Keep your stuff together and just, try and make sure that you're doing what you need to do to have your stuff together, keep the kids supported, and just be as little, and I mean, there's times where you may have to, have a talk with the caseworker or one thing or another,
or
you
send, multiple text messages.
Yeah. Or you feel like, maybe they're not hearing you correct, well, like, but a normal course of, things going on, just have your stuff together, keep them informed, and just give them grace.
They're not asking you to be perfect. Don't ask them to be perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think you're right. Like, we've got a couple of kids to manage. They've got 20 kids plus the parents' services to deal with.
Yeah. I'm going to go to this one. It says, what happens if you, switching roles completely, what happens if you need to go out of state? And they said, what is respite? So if you haven't heard us talk about respite, it is basically overnight babysitting for children that are in foster care. You cannot just leave a child that's in, even babysitting. Your babysitter for foster care has to have several different courses. They have to have a background check. Really, I think it's kind of admirable. I should have done that for my own children. But, it's nice knowing that these kids that come into the system, they want to make sure that these kids continue to stay safe in a better situation. And so respite is what you do when A, you're going out of town or something and you cannot take the foster child with you. B, sometimes we get something called burnout, and when we get burnout, our family will step in and say, hey, let us take the kids for a little bit. That's not necessarily always the case when you have a foster child. So you may say, okay, I just need a break. I need a weekend to collect my thoughts, give myself a little me time, have a little, time for a date. And through respite, you can have that time. Somebody can take your foster child overnight. Now, one thing that I do want to encourage people is, if you are interested in the foster care system and you think maybe you'd like to be a foster family at some point, try being a respite provider. And if you need someone to provide respite for, we will always take people that can be on our respite list. Talk to any foster family. They would love to have you on their respite list. And I believe that you can actually go to an agency and become a respite provider and not be a foster parent.
Yeah. And also, I think if you're dipping your toes in by doing respite, by being respite certified, you get a lot of the same training, not all of them, but some of the same trainings that you need as a foster parent. You get them knocked out. Yeah. So you get a taste of what the admin side looks like too.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we have a little girl that's coming to our house in about a week and a half that's going to stay with us for her week while her foster parents are gone. And that's just providing respite for them. And right now, since our house is on a break, we're not currently taking foster children, we still gotta get to hang out with the foster care system and be involved. Avery's definitely very excited about that. I don't think Beckett understands what's going on, but he'll love having a friend to play with. But it allows us to stay involved even when our home isn't open.
And back to there was another part of the question.
If you need to go out of state.
So overnight trips, you just need to let the caseworker know. This is what we've been told. Most of the caseworkers have told us this. It may change. Check with your caseworker. 72 hours, you need more approvals, and out of state needs judge's approval, right? So, and depending on the judge and the circumstances, like, that may not get approved. And so
sometimes they have to get the biological families.
Yes. I forgot. That's also one of the steps too for something.
But one of the nice things is our last foster babies caseworker told us that recently they have been approving cruises, which was something that we were told in the beginning would
don't even try.
Happen.
Just
don't even try.
Just get respite
they go out
set
of the
up.
country. But Apparently now that's becoming a thing. So it's totally okay to go on vacations with your foster children. We talk about something called normalcy a lot with foster care.
There's a training for that too.
There is a training for that. There's a training for everything. But it's called normalcy. You want that child to have everything that your own biological children would have. You're wanting them to have the most normal childhood that they can given their circumstances. And so if you're going to Disney World,
take them with you.
By golly, take them with you, but you've got to get the approval first.
Check always.
Yes, don't just.
And if you have questions and if you're not sure, ask your case manager and or your caseworker. In this situation, it is better to ask permission.
Yes. Never ask for forgiveness. Always ask permission when you're taking them somewhere. And truthfully, if you find out you're going on a vacation in 3 months, give your caseworker a heads up then, because if it's something that's big enough, they're going to have to speak to the judge. There may not be a hearing before then. So as soon as you know, just let your caseworker know.
And then also, if for whatever reason it's like, no, they really can't, for whatever reason they can't go with you, then that gives you 3 months to figure out respite.
Exactly. Good answer. Okay, so this next one we talked a little bit about during our interview. But the question is, what happens if you don't think that a foster child is a good fit for your family? It feels really hard using those words because they're not like shoes or clothes. But what happens if, and it could be either way, like what happens if you are not a good fit for them or they're not a good fit for you? Do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, so that's a really hard one, and that's a really hard decision to come to. Mm-hmm. So I don't remember if we mentioned it before on the previous podcast. Before you get to that point, please talk to your case manager, talk to your caseworker. If it's something that you need services for, there's services available. You know, there's all sorts of things that can be done before you get to that point. Mm-hmm.
Can I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
Something that I wish that they had when we had our placement that we had to disrupt with, that they now have, is called PAT. And I really think that this would have been such a really cool resource. Now, the little girl that we had to disrupt with is where she needs to be. She's been adopted by that family, and Amen. I truly believe that now. Yes, truly believe that now. But it hurts in the moment, especially when you feel like
maybe we didn't do enough.
Yeah, and you feel kind of guilt over it. But there's something called PAT now, which is Parents as Teachers. And our agency was telling us that this is a new, maybe not a new now, but it wasn't a thing that I remember whenever we were fostering the first time.
They didn't mention anything about that during the trainings the first time around.
Right. Parents as Teachers, where they basically will come into the home, and it's almost like another therapy, like a speech therapy or a physical therapy, and they work with you as the parent on how to combat these behaviors that you might be seeing. You know, maybe it's a physical behavior, maybe it's a verbal behavior, and they will come in and help you, almost like super nanny, I guess, like that kind of concept where they come in and sit with you and help you work through these behaviors with the child. And that may be one step to not having to disrupt. Now, sometimes that's inevitable. You're going to have to disrupt, but that's just something, that's one of the resources that they could offer you.
Yeah. So definitely check out your resources, talk to your, case manager, and after that, I feel like if you feel led to it, talk to, someone you respect, a pastor, something like that. And then, if you come to the decision that it is, you need to disrupt, then that's usually an email to your case manager. And then they have 30 days to put the child somewhere else. And I think that's a big thing to know. Like, this is not a pull the plug and we're done. This is a pull the plug and then
they have 30 days.
So just, be cognizant of that fact, that, it's not instantaneous. However, you can ask for respite.
Right.
If you feel like you need a break, and then, from there.
And if the behaviors are, I don't want to say the word bad enough, but
severe.
If they're escalated severe enough, they will give you, you can ask for respite. I do like how you said talking to somebody that you respect, talking to a pastor, talking to somebody who's done this before. There are some really good Facebook groups. So I'm a part of a couple of them on Facebook, and I find myself going there if I have questions, or sometimes if it pops up on my feed, I really like to read them and see, because it's almost like a taboo thing. You're like, oh gosh, I had to disrupt. But what you realize is that it happens. It happens more than people think. People are ashamed to say it. But you have to, like we said in the beginning, create every single person in your family as a priority. Biological kids, parents, foster children, everybody has to be a priority. And there are times when you are not the right family for that child. So there are options. Okay. Oh, this is a good one. So they asked, can the families of the children contact you directly?
No.
Oh, really?
No. That has to start from our end.
Right.
And
I think
okay. They can't contact you out of the blue. Let me rephrase my answer. They cannot contact you out of the blue. And so it's generally a case-by-case basis. Sometimes it's not really something they want to set up. Sometimes they do. It just depends on the situation, the kids, the parents, where they're at. But yeah, definitely any communication has to start from the foster parent side. They will not give your information to the parent out of the blue.
Right. And in the beginning, you do everything through the caseworker. So like we let a caseworker know, hey, he's got an appointment on this day. They can let parents know. We can tell caseworker, hey, baby's, got this going on. Can you ask parents if he's had this immunization? And that parent can then speak through the caseworker. With our second placement, I would send a notebook and I would ask questions in it. Did it ever get answered? No. And that's okay. But it was opening the door that if that parent ever wanted to ask us a question or wanted us to know something about their child, that they could. Almost like hey, we're not this like scary person. We understand that we're taking care of your child and we want your child to be as comfortable as they can be. So if you have any tips, like let us know. I don't think it's as common in the state of Texas, but in many other states, they may have phone calls with parents, and that's done through the foster parent. During COVID, that was also a huge thing too. They couldn't meet in these, they couldn't have visits. And so a lot of times these visits would be done over Zoom, over FaceTime. And so I think that was kind of a different thing. We were not foster parents during the height of COVID and never had to deal with that, but
well, I think it also depends on the age of the children too. Like you're taking care of a baby, the baby's not going to FaceTime.
Right.
Like that is not a bonding experience for the child. So as you get older, those kinds of things may be more common, but we don't have experience there. So we can't necessarily speak to, what that looks like. Just from our experience, we usually don't have, any, contact without the mediation of the caseworker.
Right. And when you do visits, it's different too. So I'm not just taking a child to a biological parent's house and dropping them off. That's not how it goes. There are two places right now that we've done visits, one of them being the CPS office, and they're very clear and make it very easy for foster parents and safe, because in some cases, most cases not, but in some cases it may not be safe for a foster family to meet with the biological family. We have not ever had that happen, but that could be the case in some cases. So the way that it works at CPS is the foster parents go to one side, they text and say they're there, a monitor comes out, grabs the child, takes them inside, then the foster parent leaves or sits in the parking lot, and then parents actually park in a different place and go in a different door. So that's the same for the other place that we've been to as well. We parked in the back, a monitor came and got the child, the family parked in the front, and then when you come pick up, it's the same thing. You text, I'm here, they bring the child out, and they'll let you know, oh, they had a good time, they had a bottle, they had a dirty diaper at this time, the last time they ate was this. So it's not usually do you communicate with the foster families. Not to say it's never going to happen, though.
No.
2 more questions. This one's a little bit touchy, I think, and it's a little deeper. So this person asks, with so many people in the United States wanting to adopt, why are there so many kids in foster care? I think there's a couple things to that, but
I think I'm going to preface with saying this is our opinion.
This is our opinion.
I think it's because, number one, there's a lot more when you take a kid out of foster care or you have a child in foster care and you're taking care of them, there's a lot more paperwork involved. and not just like the upfront of like, okay, we have to do a bunch of paperwork to get this child, but you have to keep up with your trainings year by year. And also it's not a for sure thing that an adoption is going to happen. There are cases, they call them baby Moses cases, where, a child is dropped off at a safe center and they don't even know who the parent is and there's zero parental connection. But those are very,
very rare.
Very rare.
And every agency in that area is going to fight to have one of their families have that baby, because they know that baby will go to an adoption. Yeah. 99.999% of the time.
And I mean, there are people signed up, that is their goal. They say, I want a baby Moses case. We just want to adopt. We don't want to deal with anything else. That's what we want. Which is to each their own. But the foster care system is not really geared towards that,
Right. They're totally separate.
Yeah. And so I think that's why you don't see it as much, is that it's not a for sure thing that you're going to adopt. You could have a child for 6 months and, a kinship foster come out of the woodwork and they're going to say, cool. All right. Thank you for, watching them for 6 months. We're going to put them with the kinship foster. Have a great day.
What you're saying is there's more of a risk when it comes to foster parenting.
Yeah, for
Many
sure.
different risks involved. Let's go even deeper and talk about the elephant in the room, that people think that when you adopt a child when you adopt a child, let's say you are adopting a child, you go through an agency, you pay all the fees, everything, you adopt this child. Versus having a baby in foster care who eventually is adopted, there are going to be two different situations there. However, both of those children are going to go through at some point realizing
that they're adopted.
Probably that they are adopted. And as much as we like to say that it's not trauma, it's trauma. These even babies that come from foster care have trauma. The trauma of not being with their parent, even if they were taken from the hospital, is still trauma, because at some point they're going to have to deal with the fact that they were adopted. And so, but on paper, foster care is more risky. These people that are adopting, they're like, oh, well, we just want a risk-free situation. And here's this precious new clean slate baby. And there's kind of a stigma for that, I think.
Yeah.
Even though I believe, trauma in both of them. There's going to be trauma whether it's a private adoption versus a foster care adoption. But I do believe that there is a huge risk when it comes to adopting through foster care, because you have this, well, they could leave at any point. And it's hard on the heart. Also, just being really logistical about it, they're two different systems. So yes, there may be a lot of people in the United States who want to adopt, but foster care in the beginning is not about adoption. Yeah. Foster care is about reunification. It may lead to adoption, but their first and foremost goal is going to be reunification. And if somebody doesn't want to go through that process, they're going to go straight adoption. And I think that's a big part of it.
Well, I think also, I haven't seen the numbers on how many people, you meet a lot of people like, oh, we want to adopt, but they've just said that, right? Mm-hmm. They're not actually signed up to be an adoptive parent. They're not actually going through any of that process. So it's like, okay, we need to separate the people that are just saying it versus the people that are actually like, yeah, no, like we're on the list. We're on the list, and we just,
people say the same thing about why are there people that are trying to adopt outside of the country when there are so many kids inside of the country that need to be adopted. There can be an argument or a creative discussion about that as well. It's just different things. Yeah. So,
okay. And it's a hard thing to deal with either way, and there's a lot of ups and downs in any of those processes. This is just the one that we've decided. This is the one that called to us. Mm-hmm. And,
if we adopt one day,
yeah,
great. It will be a celebration at that point, but that's not ultimately why we've decided to
we want to help. We want to help the kids. We don't, if they join our family, amazing. That'll be, a wonderful day if it happens, but that's not the goal.
Correct. Okay. So to end out this video, the last question is, how can someone who is wanting to become a foster family start the process? I get really excited when I see that, actually, because I feel like a lot of the times we hear, oh, I could never do that. Oh, I could never do that. Oh, I could never do that. the funniest thing that I hear is when people say like, "Oh, I could never do that. I would never want to be able to give them. I would never want to give them back." I'm like, "Well, we don't really have a choice. We can't just
Good
keep
luck
them in
with
our
that
home
one.
forever." But so if you're wanting to get involved, I would say first and foremost, do your research. Are you wanting to join an agency that is strictly Christian based? Are you wanting to join an agency that is, I don't know, there's all kinds of different things, but do your research. Go online and type in foster agencies near me and see what pops up. And then I would recommend going to every single website, reading their stuff, and then filling out a contact us. We got lucky, and the first one that I contacted was the first one that called me back, and we love them. But there are so many different agencies, and you may find that one agency prioritizes something that's more important to you over other agencies. And so do your research there, do all the contact us, get as many notes as you can. A lot of them have informational meetings. Go to an informational meeting. Talk to people who have been foster parents before.
Talk to people that have or are fostering through the agency that you're,
Yes.
if you come up with an agency like this is the one I think I want to go to. See if you can talk to people that have fostered through them, are currently fostering through them, and get their take on it too. I think that's just as important.
Right. And the other thing, like logistically, I feel like I've said that word a couple times today. Logistically, get ready to get your ducks in a row. Like you're going to have your driving record. You're going to have a blueprint of your house. You're going to have a fire extinguisher. Like there are all kinds of things that you can do while you're waiting. You may have a course that you have to take in person that's in 2 weeks. Well, fill those 2 weeks with the things that you can check off the list right now to keep you motivated. And that gets you closer and closer to being licensed.
Yeah. And be ready for a lot of online trainings.
Yep.
A lot of online trainings.
Mm-hmm. And do respite while you're waiting. Because respite, like Robbie said, is like one step before foster care. You've got trainings that you have to do. You have to be CPR certified. I don't know if they have to have other just CPR certified, I think.
Just CPR, yeah.
And a background check. But those are things you need to be a foster parent. So once you've got those things done, sign up to be a respite provider and dip your toe in that way. But thank you for those that gave us questions. These are very, very, very helpful and something that we hope has helped you too if you were thinking about or just kind of wondering what certain things look like, because it is, for most people, a very foreign concept.
And also slightly terrifying for some people too.
Yes, I can totally see that. Until next time, thank you guys so much for watching the Unveiled podcast. We'll see you later. Bye.